All right. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Oh, my goodness. It is Wednesday. It is 4 p.m. Pacific. It's time for Starfinder Wednesday. I almost said Starfinder Saturday. It's the alliteration. It's Starfinder Wednesday, everybody. Thank you so much. And we're doing another deep dive into some lore, which I love these shows. I want to have these shows all the time. Today, we're going into Apostae, which is a small planetoid out there somewhere in the Pact Worlds. And we're not exactly sure where it is until we talk to our guest today, Owen Casey Stevens. Hey, pal, how you doing?
Good. I'm doing good. Hi, folks.
Hey, Starfinder Saturday confirmed. See, I didn't mean to do that. That was a slip of the tongue.
Yeah, Starfinder Saturday is going to have someone else sitting in this chair, right? That's not...
Yes. Yeah, I think Saturday around here probably looks pretty empty.
Yeah.
I should start it up on a Saturday just to see what it looks like. Maybe, what if we catch ghosts or something like that? That'd be kind of cool. Somebody's comment was held for moderation. I'm not sure why, but yes, it is me, your old pal Dan. Thanks for joining us. Let me allow that right now. Boom, there you go. So we're doing a show. We're going to be doing a deep dive into Apostae. And I've been saying it wrong probably for a while. Just literally right as we sat down, I was like, how is it again? And then I heard it and I was like, oh, that's totally not how I've been saying it. Owen, just to confirm.
Apostae.
There you go. What I'm hoping to do with a lot of these shows, we do have some really exciting announcements and some really good shows planned for Starfinder coming up. But in the meantime, I thought, Starfinder's so big. There's the Pact Worlds is huge. There's, it's not regions that we're dealing with.
No,
these are planets. And so I wanted to, for myself, selfishly, because I can make this decision, I'm going to say I wanted to learn more about the Pact Worlds and know more about the citizens and the aliens and the agreements and the kind of shadowy businesses that are doing their thing. And slowly, I think over time, we've been able to do more and more of those. And I hope we can continue, except for when we're having fun with like a big reveal or a product in-depth thing. So if you like those things, let me know. That's my Twitter handle right here. Let me know if you want to see more of the lore videos. I also am not 100% sure, but I would like to do them for Pathfinder as well. Let me know if you want to see those things, because ultimately I want to, as selfish as I can be with doing the shows, I still want to do what you folks want to see out there. So hit me up. Let me know what you think as far as lore. Getting to lore, Owen, let's talk about Apostae.
Let's talk about Apostae. So Apostae was a really interesting nut to try and crack in the development process for the Pact Worlds, because it was originally presented in Distant Worlds, which was written by James Sutter, who was our original creative director for Starfinder.
Right.
And in Distant Worlds, the big mystery about it is, hey, is this actually a planet, or is this like a generation ship? And there were these creatures on it, the Ailey, who came in a whole lot of different shapes and forms that did not seem related to each other. And that was sort of the big question of what is going on in the Pathfinder timeline with Apostae.
Okay.
And we didn't want to answer that, because a lot of GMs have a lot of fun with that question. And the Gap gave us this opportunity to make it something different without having to address what has been concluded about those things. So at the same time, we were also realizing that we had some other things that we sort of really wanted in the setting, but that had been very tied to Golarion, which Golarion, the planet's gone now. So anything tied to Golarion, we need a new home for.
Yeah.
And one of those things were the Drow.
Yes,
so in Pathfinder, we have this underground kingdom and different tiers, and the Drow live down there. And even though elves aren't native to Golarion, Drow are. The elves that became Drow, that had that series of events turn them into that happened on Golarion. So if we're moving the Drow someplace, we got to find a new home for them.
Yeah.
We don't want to have had a huge war. We don't want to displace other interesting things that we still want in the setting. But then here's Apostae, which has currently a mystery that we don't want to continue. We don't want it to have gone on forever at this point. We don't want to solve it. So we just decided that sometime during the Gap, the Drow moved to Apostae. And the Drow are really mostly a secret in Pathfinder. Most people don't know Drow exist, and their entire groups are dedicated to making sure that no one knows Drow exist. So having them be a very public, very well-known, very present group in Starfinder. Let us do something very, very different with Drow than we had ever done with Pathfinder and have them be a very different force. And that seemed like a more interesting place to take the story.
Yeah, and they're in the Pact.
Yeah.
They're a part of the Pact.
Yep.
So it's not even a thing where it's like, oh, they're there, but they're on the fringes. They're right in the middle of the action of government and all of that.
They have a seat on the Pact Council. They are considered to control that planet. But they don't really have what one would call a planetary government for the most part. They are controlled by a series of megacorporations, which are mostly weapons and munition companies, experimental vehicles, armor, and literally armies for sale.
Oh wow! Okay, so they're a lot of their industry is revolving around weapons and machines of war.
Yeah, machines and devices of war and people to fight those wars for you. So they have all of these second-class citizens. They've got orcs and mongrel men and troglodytes, that other things that also lived in that underground area in Pathfinder.
Right.
A lot of that has moved to Apostae, and Apostae is basically a lifeless rock. So taking those underground cavern-based societies and saying, maybe those still exist on Golarion, no one knows what's going on with Golarion, but some of that moved to live in the underground lifeless rock of Apostae so that cultural and thematic association was kept together. So they have armies of orcs, and they've got things that they're digging up from the interior of Apostae, because it did used to be sort of a generation ship. There's still secret technology in there that they will literally go or pay other people to go dig it up, analyze it, retrofit it, and turn it into new weapons, which they will officially only sell, of course, to people with proper licensing and authority and purpose for it. But one assumes that there is an enormous black market for Drow weaponry.
You would think. What kind of weapons are coming out of the Drow type?
So they've got all the stuff that you'd expect from everyone else. In the armory, we actually talk about the book Starfinder Armory. We talk a little bit about some of the manufacturers, and one of them is House Zeiserer, that does a lot of experimental weapons and disintegrator weapons and things that are sort of considered not standard for most military. So they're sort of preferred by small units and mercenaries and bounty hunters and things like that, which tend to be kind of a little cheaper but not quite as reliable, maybe as better name brands like Abadar Corp or something.
Right, but they're not like knockoff. They're not like cheap. They're reliable.
Yeah, they're reasonably reliable.
Reasonably reliable. Okay.
Reasonably reliable.
Okay, I gotcha. And along with that, when they are able to supply, just throwing bodies at things also. So it's like, here's an army for you.
Yep. If you've got the credits, they've got the troops.
So I would imagine the population of Apostae has to have a lot of these orcs and mongrel men and all of those sorts of things.
Yeah, I mean a decent sized number. So the thing is that there's no atmosphere on Apostae, and there's no natural water on Apostae. So to survive on Apostae, you have to have enough money to literally pay for your air and water. Right? Those things aren't free. Your air isn't free. So pretty much everyone answers to some sort of corporation, either directly as a serf for a low-level worker or a corporate drone, or indirectly if you are, for example, a gang that keeps control in some of the lower slum rock levels, where mostly you don't find Drow corporate business people being willing to go that far down. Maybe there are people who are keeping that area, under control, and then they get payoffs. It's the whole thing is the sort of mega corporation concept that is common in cyberpunk, given a science fantasy spin. So there is pretty much one industry on Apostae because it has no natural resources beyond dug up ancient technology. It has a nearly slave labor force because, yes, theoretically you have rights and you have a job, but if you cannot continue to pay for your air and water and food, the only option you have other than that is to fly off the rock, and that rock is far, far away from anything useful. And the only real trade it has are people that are going there to buy or sell weapons.
Right.
And then there's the Nightarch.
The Nightarch.
The Nightarch.
Okay, what is the Nightarch?
So Nightarch is the name of the biggest city, the only real major city on Apostae, and it is called that because there is literally a giant archway that predates the Drow showing up. It's mentioned back in the Distant Worlds book, so it's pre-Gap.
Okay.
And periodically, for reasons no one can ascertain, with timing no one has figured out, using technology or magic no one understands, that arch fills up with a portal to some distant world.
Same world, different world.
Different world every time.
Okay.
Some totally unknown, so far utterly unexplored world, and as far as everyone knows, it's never done the same one twice.
Okay, so I'm sure, and I think ultimately we like to leave a lot of this open to the GMs to fill in some of those gaps. But it's just rich with the ideas that maybe Apostae might have been invaded accidentally by one of these portals. Can people go both ways through this portal?
While it's open, but it's open for a random amount of time, right? So you could have a number of minutes, you could have a number of hours, in rare cases you might have a number of days. So obviously there are people who want to explore and study this thing.
Right.
So in addition to the people that are coming to buy and sell weapons, you've got the groups that either want to study the Arch, in which case, since there are a number of houses that control Nightarch, you have to get their permission, you got to buy in. That is, it's a corpocracy, right? It's government is the series of competing businesses with one another.
Okay.
And then there are even people that want to go through it when and if it opens. So you basically get a team together, you get a visa, you sit around the plaza waiting to see if it opens up. And it does. You have to make a go, no-go decision. Is that all we know about it is what we can see through this arch? Are we willing to walk through there or not?
So that actually brings up a really interesting question. So there's like, so they're like mercenaries or whatever, kind of camped out, just waiting. It's almost like they're following the Grateful Dead, but instead they're waiting for the
arch,
for the arch to open up.
Yep.
Okay. Are there any lore-based stories that happen because of this arch?
There aren't any that we've told yet. But it's certainly a rich possibility. And one of the things we note is that while people have gone through, no one's ever come back.
No one's ever come back.
No one's ever come back, and no one's found the worlds that the arches go to. So far, you can't get a drift-capable starship through the arch. It's not that big.
Okay.
Or at least no one's managed it yet. So when you go through, you are going to some distant world, some far-off place, but you don't know where in the galaxy it is. You don't know how to communicate from there. There's a good and logical reason why those people are cut off. There are always people willing to explore the unknown. So there are always some people willing to make that trip. And of course, the Drow are more than happy to sell them their survival supplies and tents and hunting rifles and self-defense grenades.
Yeah, that are okay, but not quite.
That depends on the manufacturer.
That's fair.
But Sizer is a specific popular choice.
Yes, absolutely. And so I assume, but we have no way of knowing this, I'm sure. But we don't know where these portals are going, but we also don't know when these portals are going, I would assume.
We don't know when they're going to open up. We don't know how long they last. And we don't know if they're in the same time frame.
The lore potential there is just amazing.
And there's this interesting connection in that there are, in Starfinder, as there was in Pathfinder, there are these elf gates, which go from world to world in the Pact worlds. Not all the worlds are connected, but several worlds are connected with elf gates.
Okay.
No one knows for sure the origin of the elf gates. They're ancient as of the time Pathfinder happens, so they're impossibly ancient by the time you're talking about Starfinder.
Right. But I suspect the elves had something to do with it, though?
Well, that's the belief, and we know that the elves used them. That's how the elves got back and forth from Castrovel and Delirium.
Because they built them.
But we don't know for certain if they built them or not. They certainly seem similar to the Nightarch, but they're not the same.
And I suppose that there's no markings or any way to tell if they if they are from the same cut from the same branch.
I mean, they're not as big, certainly, and they don't go randomly, right? They function in a specific way. But the main way you would answer that question is if either there were Drow experts that could explore elf gates, or if there were elves that could explore the Nightarch on Apostae, and elves and Drow, classically speaking, don't trust each other.
Yeah, that is kind of a problem.
And if you are an expert that has gotten access to one, there's a good chance that the other group's just not going to give you access to the other.
Right.
So some people may have pulled off some research, but there aren't like whole universities looking into that.
So then let me ask you this.
Yeah.
If we never had anybody come back that we know of, what are the chances? Well, I guess the chances are infinite. It could be anything. But they could be over there, and they could even think that they've come back. They might think that they're back.
It could be anything. You said it, right? And while it's open, it's both ways. So sure, there are people that have walked over, tapped, yes, this is a planet, and come back. Maybe some teams just leave sensors or something, but you never know when it's going to collapse.
Yeah.
So if you walk through that event horizon and you're on another world, you have taken the chance of coming home into your hands, right? You are running a gamble.
You're rolling the dice.
You are rolling the dice.
Okay.
Which we're all about rolling the dice in these games.
It's kind of an important thing to us. How big? What could you get through this thing? Like how big? You said you couldn't get a starship through it.
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely get wagons and ground vehicles and such through it. I don't know if we give the exact size, but I mean, it's a monument-sized thing.
Personal transport of some kind.
Yeah, easily. You can totally do that.
Interesting. And then when it opens, do you see what's on the other side?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not like it's not obfuscated, and then you have to get through to see it. I like this. This is really interesting. There's a lot of stuff there. And what's the name of the city that this
Nightarch.
Nightarch.
It is named for the arch.
Oh, okay. The city is Nightarch as well. Okay, and I'm pretty sure that I'm showing that, right?
Yeah, we got a great shot of Nightarch, and you can see that there are a lot of glassed-in roofs on one of the promenades there, and that's because there's no atmosphere, right? So there's if you have a park in Apostae, that park must be domed or covered. Buildings tend to go as far down deep into the earth as they do up high. So if you're seeing a tower, you can assume that if it's got 110, 150 floors, then it probably has 150 levels of basement as well.
Okay. So they're like icebergs.
Yeah, totally.
I like this. Okay.
And on top of all that, of course, there are the giant gates that give you access to the interior of Apostae, which is where the creatures that were known as Aili existed at the time, and we think that those creatures have become the Astrozoans, which are a race of shapeshifters who, natively speaking, look sort of like bipedal starfish that, again, we cover in Pact Worlds.
Yeah, exactly.
So we think that at some point during the gap, the Aili became a consistently shape-shifting race as opposed to being stuck in just 2 or 3 shapes. But even the Astrozoans don't know for certain what their origin is. And no one's sure exactly when they started moving around because they tend to operate by looking like the local population. So it's really hard to determine when did Astrozoans get to a planet. All we can say for sure is when did people start spotting them, and that's a very different question.
It totally is. So that's kind of the idea, is that they're subversive at first. You don't even realize
just cautiously,
there.
Right? I mean, if we don't know, and that probably started during the gap. So we actually don't even know why they left Apostae, why they stabilized into a single Astrozoan race, why they moved to other worlds. Right? With the Drow, you can kind of see, okay, they were underground dwellers. If Galarian started being a spacefaring society, even in a simple way, it makes sense that they may have gone there to try and explore what is basically, I mean, a hollow planet is basically a giant underground. So they would have a certain expertise in that and the desire to gather power, gather technology. But only one of the gates into that world is open, which is also at Nightarch. There are other giant doors on the surface of Apostae that no one's ever managed to open.
Really?
And no one's managed to map out all of the interior because it's the interior, I mean, it's a small world, but it's still a world. And it's a world that has existed for at least tens of thousands of years. So, the equipment is failing. There have been cave-ins. There are ancient traps. There are things that probably weren't designed as traps but are dangerous now, right? So it's basically one giant planetary science fantasy dungeon delve. There is definitely reason to go down there. People want to map it. People want to explore the archaeology of it. People want to find those caches of ancient weapons. And there are reports from people that were going in there way back before the gap that claim that there are rooms like the Armory, right? If you're a weapons dealer, you want to find the ancient alien room called the Armory, but no one's found it yet. And it has all the problems of a whole planet. So you've got, rockfalls and cave-ins and flooding from coolant rather than from an ocean, right?
right.
And the surface of Apostae, which is, it's a blasted rock, it has all these deep chasms and rifts and things, some of which cut through some of the upper layers that they've collapsed, so you might be able to find technology there. Some of them are full of radiation and strange chemicals that might be a result of having cut into the interior of Apostae. And some of them people think are haunted, but have not been able to prove that.
Really?
So,
okay.
Yeah, there are ones where expeditions are just pretty likely to go missing in that rift. But a missing expedition doesn't tell you for sure, are they haunted, or are we literally talking Scooby-Doo stuff where someone is using it as a cache to hide credits or perform illegal experiments, right? If The ethics of the mega companies of Apostae do not rise to what one would hope is the highest good citizen level for a company. So they literally they've got a wasteland, a junkyard of starships and old weaponry that they just for junking out, for scrapping, take what you need. They've got a big area that they run war games in. Just because that's one of the things they need to do is train their armies.
Yeah.
So they've got a mobile battle, or a big fake battlefield that they fight on. But they also have, hospital tents and places that they've set up over their demon worshipping temples that they don't mostly want people to know about. And
right.
There's just a lot of stuff going on in Apostae that the whole thing, it's not exactly lawless, but once you've gotten on world, if you are outside of the line of sight of a corporate goon, mostly people don't care what you do. So there are a lot of places where it's easier to land a pirate ship there, for example, if you need to go to ground, or if you've got weeks and weeks and weeks of air and water built into your armor suit, you can maybe hide from the authorities out in the wilds of Apostae.
Yeah. And then kind of building on that a little bit, because you mentioned the houses of worship for demons. Is there a deity that is kind of the general deity for the planet?
The Drow great corporations tend to have patron demons, demon lords, and they do not all worship the same demon lord. I would guess that there are some demon lords that are generally speaking more popular. Really big corporations might have different demons for different departments, right? So maybe HR has one demon that they worship, whereas R&D has a different demon they worship based on what those demons' interests are.
I feel like you're just pulling the curtain back on Paizo around here. We all have our own demons depending on which department.
I mean, all creatives have their own demons, Dan. That's an issue. Sometimes we call them muses, but we do some pretty dumb haunted things. We have a pretty weird career. But I sort of think of it. I've worked at more than one company with sort of corporate culture, and frequently those things seem to be controlled by mysterious forces that are more like, Six Sigma, or we want to reach consensus, or this guru's self-help entrepreneurism book, right? Those are the things that seem to be the religions frequently within corporations, where there's a set of rules or guidelines or ways you do things that corporation and its leaders in particular tend to push on people. I suspect in Apostae, when you're talking about these demon worshipping Drow, that for the most part they have a set of rules for running business that are inspired by the areas of concern and powers and nature of the demon that they worship. So probably you've got people going to webinars where they're talking about how to find your inner demon and how, being too structured and ordered will prevent you from taking opportunities. And you've got to look out for yourself. And as soon as we've said, hey, you've got to constantly be flexible, constantly be willing to break the rules, push the boundaries, think outside the box, look out for number one self, then we have described chaos and evil. So it's literally a webinar on being chaotic evil.
It's true.
All wrapped up in why this is good for you as a businessman, why this is good for you as a middle manager or a corporate drone if you want to move up through the ranks. And Drow are a really long-lived race, right? And there's no encouragement to retire, because all of life support comes from these corporations. So if you leave the corporation, you stop having that decision-making power over whether or not you're going to get food and water and air. So the upper management ranks tend to be pretty stable and pretty locked in with people with a ton of seniority. There are people that have been there since the end of the gap who are still the presidents and vice presidents and chairmen and CEOs of these corporations. So upward mobility is an issue. So then
I'm still, my brain is still stuck on like the idea of a Tony Robbins Drow.
Totally.
It's just all over that, like the TED Talks, like, Drow Talks. I don't know, whatever we want to call that.
Abyss Talks.
There it is. Is there a vacation area on Apostae? Like if they need to get away.
So there isn't a vacation area on Apostae, but they've got domed cities and buildings that are pretty much, the mega buildings are self-contained towns with their own atmosphere plants and their own water reserves and their own power generation, which we mentioned in the Pact Rules, that these buildings can seal themselves off from the big important ones, from the rest of the town. So one suspects that they would have all the things a town would have. So they're going to have some interior parks. They're definitely going to have, virtual reality recreation rooms. They're going to have clubs. They're going to have taverns. They're going to have dance floors. That's all going to be in there. But Apostae is a corporately driven, big, lifeless rock full of ancient technology and monsters. It does not have a tourist zone, really. You might go there for some purpose other than just achieving power. You might be an archaeologist or a scholar, or you might even be a colonist who's willing to risk rolling the dice and bribing some drow to let you sit around and walk through the Nightarch. But you're not there to tour, to have a good time. If you want to do that, you're getting off Apostae, which means that is mostly only happening for people that have the money. Yeah. So anything a corporation has, right? There are corporate retreats. Sure, so there are corporate retreats on Apostae, but those are for people who work for those companies. And they are more about clubhouses than they are about golf courses. And they might well have zero-G golf courses, so you can just go out on the lifeless rock and knock a ball around and there are holes. But I don't guarantee that.
It's more that there's distractions, not necessarily resorts.
Totally. I mean, there are slums down in the lower levels. I'm sure that they've got cockroach racing and fight clubs, and we both put 3 volatile chemicals in a bottle, shake it up, and we stand back and bet on which one explodes first. Those are all things that I'm certain are happening down there.
I like these games.
And since we've got troglodytes, we haven't studied them up yet, I don't think. But troglodytes stink, so we probably have things like sniff the trog as a form of distraction. I think distraction is an excellent description of what, because that's not entertainment, really.
No, I wouldn't call it entertainment either.
And they probably get a lot of broadcasts from EOX, so the EOX game shows and death sports and stuff are probably pretty popular.
There's probably that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So I've made you talk for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
It's been fun. What we're going to do is I'm going to say goodbye to the YouTube folks.
Okay.
And then we'll do some Q&A with anybody that might have some questions.
Sounds great.
And then we'll probably still continue to talk after that.
Seems likely.
So,
yeah.
All right, let's do this. All right, folks, thank you so much for joining us. Today, our guest has been Owen K.C. Stevens, and we've been talking about Apostae. I got it right. We've been talking about Apostae and the lore behind the planet. If you'd like to know more, a good book to get into would be the Pact Worlds.
Yep.
Is probably the best one. Also the core rulebook.
Yes, has some information on it.
Has some information. And yeah, so if you have any other questions, feel free to hit us up on
and
Twitter.
Alien Archive for Drow.
Oh yeah, that's right. Alien Archive for the Drow. And so with that, we're going to say thank you so much for joining us. If you liked it, please consider hitting that subscribe button, the bell notification button, so you know when I'm updating stuff. I upload videos about 4 times a week now, soon to be more. So beyond that, thank you so much for joining us. I'm happy that you could be here. If you'd like to be a part of the Q&A that we're about ready to start right now, join us Wednesdays at 4 p.m. Pacific, twitch.tv/officialpaizo. And until next time, for Owen and for Paizo and for me, your old pal Dan, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Bye. There it is. All right.